Hello. This is the first in a series of sessions put on in collaboration between the Tennessee Department of Education and the Center for Educational Leadership at the University of Tennessee. The Learning Accelerator is privileged to facilitate this first session about transitioning to remote learning. I'm Jeremy Jones. I'm a partner at the Learning Accelerator where I focus on school and system strategy. I also spend a lot of time thinking about how we can best support principals and other school leaders by developing the knowledge, the tools, and the resources for modern teaching and learning practices. A long time ago, I worked with the Achievement School District in Tennessee, supporting schools in the Fraser neighborhood of North Memphis. I've also been a school leader myself. I was a principal at a middle school in West Houston for 5 years, where we served over 1,000 students. And during my time there, we started a program to provide iPads for all of our students. For me and my team, that transition took us about 8 months, and throughout that time, we made mistakes and learned valuable lessons. It wasn't an easy process, but it was worth it. And it was a process that we chose and we anticipated. You all have been forced to transition in a matter of weeks. I can't imagine the challenges you're facing, but from one principal to another, I appreciate the work you are doing to help support your communities right now. I know there are amazing things happening across the state, and I'm extra proud to be working with you today. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. The Learning Accelerator is a national nonprofit organization helping to make the potential possible and practical for every teacher and student in America. We believe that every child deserves a highly effective, highly engaging, and highly equitable education that enables them to reach their full potential. Our core belief is that terrific teaching and learning practices are supported by technology and informed by data. The combination of these factors accelerate a child's ability to maximize her potential. We have 3 strategic drivers that move us closer toward this vision. First, we work alongside educators who are doing innovative things in schools. We capture problem-solving strategies, new ideas, and tools for implementation or change management. We've worked with educators in schools all over the country, and in doing so, we get to pull out these best practices and share them with others. We also know that educators are a powerful force when they're working together. The collective intelligence of groups of teachers and leaders can go a long way when solving complex problems. So we bring those groups together to tackle pressing issues. And finally, the work that is done alongside educators and creating networks of educators to solve problems doesn't do anyone any good unless we are thoughtful about how we package and share it with the world. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how to get these resources out to you. Everything that we create is free and open so that all schools and all students can benefit from it. Having been a principal myself, I often search for tools that could continue pushing my school to ever greater stages of achievement. The tools and resources that we put together are world-class, and had I known about TLA before joining the team, I think I could have been an even better principal. This is our practices site, practices.learningaccelerator.org. I encourage you to check it out and bookmark it. Here you're going to find case studies, strategies, and other resources that are free and open to use. I'm confident that digging in, you'll find something valuable for you. You might be familiar with Simon Sinek. He's a popular author and TED speaker, and his book Start With Why is a valuable reminder for leaders that we should constantly focus on and communicate purpose. Sinek's research says that the greatest leaders think, act, and communicate in the same way, and that is through a clarity of purpose and vision. Every organization knows what they do. In schools, we're pretty clear on that. We teach students. Certainly we do a lot of other things too, but our primary thing is to teach kids, and for the most part, we're pretty good at that. Some organizations are clear on how they do what they do. You probably have a good idea of your school's how. Maybe you have a strong reading program or use Accelerated Reader to build a culture of reading. Maybe you're a STEM program or you believe in project-based learning. Whatever it is, your how is the process for how you do what you do. And according to Sinek, few organizations know why they do what they do. For us in school, that is pretty easy. We know that the stakes are high for the work that we do. If we don't do our jobs well, students won't be successful. So our purpose is probably partially driven by wanting students to be successful, but my guess is there's something deeper there too for each one of you. For instance, my own personal why and why I became a teacher and a principal was because I believed that students growing up in low-income neighborhoods deserved the best schools that we could offer them. When I communicated that purposely, effectively to others, it helped me motivate teachers, families, and students, which helps us all be more successful. Everyone is here for a different reason today, and it's important to start with clarifying why you're here. Take a minute in the chat box to share your name, your school, and where you are located and why you're here today. In doing so, I challenge you to go deep and really tell your fellow principals why you're attending. So just take that second, give us your name, your school, where you're located, and why you're here today. You can keep chatting those as we move along, but as school leaders, we have all spent time working with our teams on mission statements, visions, goals, and strategies. In times of crisis, these things can easily get lost, but they're more important than ever before. Today is all about starting plans for remote learning. You will learn some new terms, some new strategies, but your plan takes on the greatest importance when you connect your remote learning plan to the values and the purpose of your community. Everything we do needs to be driven by our values, and nothing we do digitally matters if it's not aligned with our vision for kids and how we want to learn together. Here are some key ideas for our session today. A couple of key things to keep in mind. We're focused on remote learning here. You likely have a million other needs that we won't meet today, but the learning and planning that you're going to do today is going to help you now, and it'll help you in the future. We've designed this session to maximize differentiation. There's something here for everyone. We pulled together the best resources from around the country and created an action planning guide that you can customize for your own purposes based on what you need. And finally, we've structured this session in a way that provides a model for how you might conduct remote sessions with your staff. Certainly, this isn't the only way to do it, but we find that it's helpful to give an example for those that are just starting out. So we do hope that it's a model for you. We only have 90 minutes together today, and that's not a lot of time, but I think we'll use it purposefully. First, we're going to dedicate some time to gaining a basic understanding of remote learning, including some terms you may have never heard before and some remote learning approaches that may be unfamiliar to you. We don't expect you to become an expert after this, but my hope is that this gives you a starting place and creates some shared knowledge between all of us on the call. The second part of our session is all about you and your plan. You'll have some time to dig into the action planning guide, which will allow you to self-assess your readiness for remote learning, identify some focus areas, and begin planning using the resources we put together for you. And the last portion of our session today, perhaps the last 40 minutes or so, we're going to break into small groups where we're going to share our successes, our challenges, and our next steps in our planning. There are three things to consider when we cover the basics of remote learning. We have analog and digital models, and we have asynchronous, synchronous models, and then we also have some tools that you might consider. So 3 parts here, analog and digital, how you learn, asynchronous, synchronous, when you learn, and the tools that you can use to learn. So in thinking about analog and digital tools, you may be surprised to learn that remote learning models can be both analog and digital. And certainly some of the folks on this call may remember the original remote learning courses that were done by correspondence. You signed up for a correspondence course, you got materials sent to you, you learned and performed skills on your own, and you sent back whatever assessments you had in order to earn credit. Well, many of those same core principles exist here when transferring your courses into a digital or online context. Both approaches have advantages and disadvantages, and those communities that do remote learning well are blending the best of each of these to combine practices and better serve students. We know that there's a huge access gap in being able to get online or have the tools available, so many schools around the country are using analog approaches to make sure that students can continue to work throughout this spring. Also, it's important to think about when you might learn. Other terms that you may not have heard of before today are asynchronous and synchronous. Basically, asynchronous means that learning happens on the learner's time, and it usually happens individually. Synchronous learning happens in real time with a variety of groupings of students. Again, there are pros and cons to each of these approaches, and which method you use is going to be dependent on your goals and what you're trying to accomplish. Ultimately, the most effective remote learning communities are blending these so that students have the opportunity to do both. And here's an example schedule that's currently being used this spring for remote learning. It combines all of the things that we just talked about. There are teacher-led synchronous groups where teachers can monitor and adjust in real time, and interactions are facilitated by a teacher. There are also times when students are learning through recorded sessions. And there are times when students are doing their own work asynchronously and independently. The best models for any remote learning practice are going to be blended. Determining your model is going to be dependent on myriad factors that are unique to your community, including the availability of technology resources, the comfort level of teachers with technology tools, and the ability to effectively communicate with your students and families. When we dig into the resources and action planning, you'll find several ways that districts across the country have approached this. Some of these might be useful for you at the very least to see how your model reconciles with others. I also just want to acknowledge that I know there are lots of challenges across the state of Tennessee, and so some of the resources may not apply to you there, but there will be a lot of resources depending on your availability of technology and other things that can still support you in this time of planning. So let's talk a little bit about the tools for remote learning. First, we've organized this in 6 different domains here, and hopefully it helps to simplify the process for you. But really, in order to execute any model, you're going to need to access some of these tools. And again, these tools are going to be dependent on your goals and your school's purpose. I also want to note that we didn't make any specific recommendations here. When you go into your action planning guide, the resources will give you some examples so that you can get started. And if you need some examples of different tools for each one of these categories, feel free to chat me in the chat box or send me an email or a tweet after this session. I'd be happy to guide you in the right direction. But first, let's talk about organizing our learning resources. You'll most likely include a learning management system to do this. These platforms will allow you to create organizational systems for your courses. They allow teachers to distribute and collect work as well as communication back and forth to students. You may already have access to a system that can actually help you do this. If your district uses Microsoft, you could use OneNote for course notebooks, or you could use Microsoft Teams for meetings. If you're on a Google platform, you might try Google Classroom. There are many other learning management systems and many ways to go about organizing your learning tools. You'll need to select a tool that's right for your school in your context. You'll also need a tool that helps with asynchronous learning. So you think about the tools that you need to offer students to have the opportunity to learn on their own time. You may need to record video lessons or provide access to digital and analog curriculum tools that allow students to manage their own time while they're doing the learning. And then there's synchronous learning. So synchronous learning means that learning happens together all at once. And the primary way that we do this is through video conferencing tools. In fact, we are synchronously learning right now all together through the Zoom platform. That may be something that you can replicate with your learning community. There are also communication tools that you'll need to consider. Aside from organizing your learning resources and determining shared and independent learning times and tools, we've got to make sure that we're communicating effectively and consistently with the multiple groups of stakeholders that depend on us. Each group probably has different needs and maybe you need different tools for each of them, but keep it simple. Keeping simple will help you stay sane and organized, but it's also going to help provide one hub of communication so that everyone is up to date with the same information at the same time. Based on your school goals and purpose, you may want to be collecting data as well. Depending on the data you want to collect, whether that's student work completion or attendance or other metrics, you may need to select tools that will help you accomplish that. And finally, remote learning is an opportunity to help students build pro-social skills in an online or virtual setting. Certainly, we've all had a lot of practice building our social skills on Zoom calls and using other technology. We need to help our kids do that too. There are multiple options that support student-to-student interactions that can be facilitated by teachers and adults that allow students to maintain the connections with their classmates throughout this school closure time. We all know that this is incredibly important and that our most vulnerable students can feel extra isolated during this time. So trying to maintain these social connections, I think, is going to be really important for kids. Selecting tools can be overwhelming, and many parents have shared their frustrations this spring with all of the platforms that schools are requiring their children to have accounts for. So, just keep in mind that as you select tools, it can be confusing for students and parents to keep up with these accounts. Selecting a few tools that meet your needs is better than trying to get a specific tool for every specific single thing that you do. For the next part of our time today, you'll have the opportunity to start planning for remote learning. Before we set you free, I want to set you up for success during this independent learning time. We have outlined how you can approach your time in planning here. First, you'll want to assess your readiness for remote learning. We have organized some priorities that you'll want to consider, and for each priority, there are stages of progress. We've identified 5 priorities for making the transition to remote learning. The first is creating and expanding access. This first priority is all about creating the infrastructure for remote learning to happen. Without devices and Wi-Fi, students don't have access to remote learning, and many of your students may be in that situation. Making progress on this first priority will help to ensure that all students can access instruction anytime and anywhere. We've got some specific resources in the action planning guide to help you do this. The second priority focuses on communication. Once you have ensured that all students can get online, you'll want to establish communication systems that help ensure that all students and families can get the latest updates and can communicate in 2 directions, meaning you can communicate out to them and they can communicate back to you. The third priority is establishing your routines and procedures. Much like we do in the beginning of the school year, we have to teach students how to think and behave in the classroom before we actually dig into content. The same is true here. Routines and procedures are all about setting the foundation of learning and may include providing teachers with professional development or teaching students how to use remote learning tools. The fourth priority is instructional planning and delivery. This is where we get to teach and learn. This priority, you'll find resources and strategies on planning for learning and strategies for teaching students. You'll also find additional supports for coaching teachers to be more effective in this area. There's going to be a range of readiness of our teachers, and certainly they're going to need to learn how to use some of these tools. Once they learn the basic practices, then we can really push and advance the teacher capacity to improve in these areas. And then finally, the fifth priority is building systems for providing essential whole child supports and interventions. These are all the non-academic things that we do in schools that help students be successful. For each priority, you'll determine where you currently are using the 3-point scale: getting started, making progress, or advanced moves. By assessing your readiness, we hope that you get a more complete picture of where you are currently so that you can create action plans for what comes next for you. When you get into the document will look like this. This is just a screenshot of the document. Based on each of the stages, you can plot out where you currently are. This step is important because it'll help you identify what your target areas, your focus areas are for planning. So let's take it to step 2. From your readiness assessment, this is where you can capture your focus areas. Your focus areas will help you narrow in on the couple of key parts that you can do next. I'm sure you've got 100 fires that you're dealing with right now, and you won't be able to solve all of those, but you can tackle 2 or 3 of those and make some progress. Certainly as school leaders, we're used to dealing with a whole bunch of things at once, and I know that you're doing that right now. My challenge to you today is just narrow in on a couple of things that you can learn more about and then create some action plans around. And your third part for your differentiated work time here is all about using the action planning guide to capture and organize your thoughts into a cohesive plan. We've included a lot of just world-class resources for your learning and investigation, and these resources are going to help you generate some solutions to the problems that you're facing. And here's what that planning guide looks like. In the planning guide, you're going to see some playlists, and those playlists are designed to help you get some knowledge and resources around your pain points or your focus areas. So you can see some examples of playlists here. So I just want to call out a couple of key resources that we've included as you kind of dig through the treasure trove that we have. There are a range of different resources, including templates. There are technology intervention plans. There are complete school remote learning plans. There are a whole range of things that once you've identified your focus areas, you'll be able to click through this document and find what some of the top schools around the country are doing. When you click into the planning guide, you'll actually see a screen pop up that will say, make a copy of this. All you got to do is click the button to say make a copy, and you will have your own individual copy. That's so that we're not all typing in one document and typing over each other. So you will be able to take that document, share it with whoever you want, download a copy, whatever it is that you need in order to do your planning time. After your independent planning time, you will be broken into small discussion groups where you will have the opportunity to discuss the plans that you've created, the challenges that you've faced, and celebrate some successes with your fellow principal colleagues. Your facilitator is going to let you know how much time you have for the independent work time, and then subsequently how much time you have for the discussion group. So if you have questions, please use the chat box. Remember these 3 steps here: consider your readiness, the focus areas, and the action planning guide. That'll help you get started on your independent work time. Wishing you a lot of luck during this time. If you need anything, please let us know. When the time's up, you'll be grouped into your small discussion groups, and then we'll come back together all at the end to summarize what we've learned and talk about next steps.
Excellent. Well, thank you to Jeremy Jones from the Learning Accelerator for that excellent presentation. We're delighted to be able to have him not only present to us in the recording today, but also have him live with us today. So Jeremy, thank you for that. And I wanted to just dig in for a minute. You talked a bit about blended learning on the presentation. And I know a lot of folks have heard that term and maybe know a little bit about what that means, but I'd love for you to just give us a little bit more of a detailed explanation about what you mean when you talk about blended learning, and maybe if you have an example of how that can be done well or where that has been done well. I think that'd be really valuable for our participants.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jim. And good morning, everybody. This is the 4th go round of this session with principals across the state, and so hopefully we get it right here in our 4th try. But it's been inspiring to talk with principals throughout the previous sessions, and just very thankful that I get to be here with all of y'all today. So yeah, I want to break down blended learning pretty simply. I mean, we often use these terms in education that can confuse people who've never heard them before. But, you know, for the most part, like, there are a lot of folks, and you might be one of those, who are already doing this kind of work. And so, you know, blended learning is really the strategic integration of in-person learning with technology that enables teachers to use data, make learning more personalized, and also support mastery-based progression. Excuse me. So I'll break those things down just a little bit. If there are questions, you can chat me in the chat box. But really, we want to think about the combination of the in-person learning with the technology, but also the ability for students to use technology asynchronously or outside of the school building as well, right? So we're blending those approaches of students using technology in schools, students using technology outside of schools. But what blended learning also means is that you walk into a classroom and you might see a teacher sitting at a kidney table doing a reading group while students are on stations potentially with technology, possibly not with technology, but maybe they're on a learning platform like Khan Academy or learning another skill, so that teachers are able to break up those small groups in a classroom and personalize that instruction for students as well. A lot of this already happens in schools. We're just tagging the term blended learning to it because it blends multiple models at once. And so the big difference is you know, a classroom with that kind of setup versus a classroom you might walk in to where you see students in, you know, sitting in desks in rows and the teacher up at front, where there's really just one model. But blended learning also helps teachers with the use of real-time data. So a good example of what that might look like is when I was a school leader in Houston, we used a platform called LightSail, which is a lot like Accelerated Reader, but what LightSail did for our students was they were able to rent books on their iPads, and as they read the book, every couple of pages, it would test them for comprehension. So we did a really good job of building fluency with our students, but we weren't as good making sure that our students were comprehending what they were reading. So we used this program that allowed students to choose books that they were most interested in. And then as they, you know, read the book, they were getting tested on comprehension throughout that book. And then we were able to see whether or not students were comprehending what they were reading. And it really actually helped us build our reading program. That was the kind of real-time data that was helpful in adjusting students' approaches or potentially doing intervention groups with students who are still struggling. There's also that level of personalization there. So the aspect of using technology or technology tools allows for teachers to maybe create different kinds of playlists or get on different platforms that will ultimately, you know, engage students' interests, but also meet their academic needs. And then finally, mastery-based progression is all about, you know, students making sure students meet or master a skill or a concept before they move on. Now, we all know that, that students will master these concepts at different rates. If we've got 25 kids in a classroom, they're not all going to master a skill at the exact same time. And so making sure that we set up systems where students can progress if they've already mastered a skill, or that they can get interventions if they haven't mastered a skill yet, is also a part of blended learning. So I'm going to put in the chat box a link to a part of the Learning Accelerators website that gives more in-depth information about what blended learning is. Again, there are also a bunch of resources here that you might be able to use when you're not so busy putting out a bunch of fires, which you are now. But that's a synopsis of what blended learning is, Jim.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Jeremy. That's really helpful. And so we're going to now transition to about 20 minutes for independent work. And if I'm going to ask you all to stay on the Zoom call, and during this time, just turn off your video and turn off your microphone. And as Jeremy noted in the presentation, we're going to ask you to do a couple of things during this short period of independent work. One is to do a sort of a self-assessment and consider your readiness for remote learning and what that looks like. And if you, again, on this slide, you can see the web address that if you, and I think we've put it into the chat as well, if you type that into your web browser, it will bring you to a Google folder that will have all of these resources in it, including the action planning guide, which has all of these components to it. So the first thing is a self-assessment, and then based on that self-assessment, where you are you getting started? Are you making progress? Are you advanced in terms of remote learning? Then there are resources for in each of the priority areas that Jeremy talked about at each of those levels of readiness. And so you can explore those strategies, explore those resources as you work through the document. And then finally, we're gonna ask you to do a little bit of planning and thinking ahead. So what does this look like moving into the future? And there's some tools within the action planning guide to help you to do that. So Jeremy and I are gonna stay in the main room of the Zoom call during this about 20 minutes that you'll have to do this independent learning and to explore these resources and strategies that are in the document. And so if you have questions, just turn on your microphone and ask, or put it in the chat box, and we will be glad to work with you and to answer those questions. And then we'll see you back here in about 20 minutes for small group discussion. We'll put you into small groups with a facilitator, and to really dive into what's worked well, what are your challenges, what are we thinking about for the future, and where do we go from here in terms of remote learning, and a great opportunity to talk with and network with your peers around this important topic of remote learning. So we're delighted that you're here with us today. Take about 20 minutes for independent work on the document that can be accessed based on the link that's on this slide. And we'll come back at about exactly 20 minutes from now, so about 11:25 Eastern time. Okay, I'm going to bring us back and get us rolling on the small group portion of our professional learning experience today. So we're going to transition into the small groups. And as you arrive in the small group, I'm going to ask you to turn your video and your microphone back on, and so that we can have some robust conversation and discussion back and forth. And a facilitator will start with some quick introductions. And just a note for our facilitators, I think we've only got about a half hour. So let's do real quick introductions and preliminaries, and then get to, I think, some of the important questions. So, you know, one of the preliminary questions is something that you're proud of, that you're doing for student learning. I think that's an important thing to talk about. But really the focus, I think, around remote learning is going to be on the next three questions, which are, I want to talk about something you're working on. So what do you aspire to do around remote learning and around student learning, and what do you hope to accomplish that you haven't yet done? So share with us something that you're working on in the small group. Something you learned today, something from the video, something from the resource guide and your exploration of resources and strategies, or something from the dialogues thus far. So what's something that you learned that you might be able to apply to your school context? And then I think the last thing, and maybe the most important, is going to be, how do we think about the future? What does this look like to move toward the future as we move toward the fall? If we're in a hybrid learning situation, or goodness, God forbid, if we're in a remote learning situation again. Oh, someone's got me. No, no mute there. Okay, if we're in a remote learning situation again in the fall, what is that going to look like? And you know, how do we begin to plan for that? How do we build the capacity for that with our teachers? How do we build the structures to ensure that we're going to provide a great education to our kids, regardless of what the situation is? So to begin to think about and plan for the future around remote learning. So you are going to receive an invitation to a small group right now. We'll take 30 minutes in the small group, then we'll come back together as a whole group and sort of debrief that a little bit and wrap things up. So thank you for your engagement. Hope the exploration and the research that you've done in the last 20 minutes was productive, and I look forward to a great conversation in the small group. So we'll send you to the small groups now. We'll have about 30 minutes, and facilitators will begin with introductions and questions. Okay, welcome back, and at this point, thank you for having shared your video, and your just to save bandwidth, if you don't mind to turn those off until you're unless you're speaking, that would be great. And I appreciate it. I was laughing just a little bit as I was moving between breakout rooms, because the challenges with remote learning are real, right? We had a couple folks who were struggling with their video. I had my dog barking in the background with his squeaky toy, and I always worry about having all the videos on, because, you know, if someone else in the house gets on the internet, my internet's gonna be unstable. So anyway, the struggle is real, and appreciate that. So I'm gonna type into the text box the link to the survey. So if you would please make sure that you copy that from the chat box and paste that into a browser, and take that survey. You know, as we wrap up, again, that gives us great feedback on the work that we're doing, and it also provides us an opportunity to know that you're here. And also the department needs to know if you want to apply the tassel credit to the current year or to the future year. So please make sure that you go to the chat box, grab that link and paste it into a browser so you can do the survey. So in the just couple of minutes we have left, I would love to invite anyone who would like to share just any insights from the small group conversation, any insights or takeaways from the independent learning that you did or from Jeremy's presentation. And I would invite any of our participants to just turn on your video and your microphone and share with us.
I'll tell you, the guys in my group are truly my heroes. Not only are they dealing with COVID-19, many of them impacted with tornadoes, with students that they've lost, and the dedication and the enthusiasm is so real. And I just so appreciate the time that they took to share with us today. We heard lots of good information, some really good new ideas.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right, Betty Sue, that we know our principals are just doing amazing work amidst just the most, challenging circumstances right now and unforeseen circumstances right now. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else want to share out something that some insights or takeaways from either the small group discussion or the research that you've done and the exploration of resources or from the presentation?
I noticed, this is Wendy Young, I noticed that we all talked about the drop off after the accountability measures for the state in terms of counting grading dropped off. And it's making me have a bigger wondering. So do our parents feel that grading is so significant that we made it so important that the learning itself isn't as important as it should be? So I'm just wondering about the paradigm for parents about how the learning is important, not just the grade. We're standards-based. We're in elementary school and we got permission to pilot standards-based. So that might be why we have more participation, because they're getting standards-based information, but we have the same problem. So what are we doing that we could do better?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think one for us to all continue to ponder. And I think a part of the challenge is how do we make sure that parents in our community and even ourselves as educators recognize that remote learning isn't necessarily less than, right? That it can be, just as effective, just as compelling, just as engaging, and just as meaningful as in-person learning if we do it well and if we utilize the tools and the resources and the mediums that we have available to be able to do this well. So, but that takes a huge effort, and I think it's also a sort of a change in perspective and culture that we'll have to encourage with our school communities and with our parents. But it's a great question, and it's one that we have to really think about in terms of incentives and how we make sure people are engaged. We probably have time for one more just takeaway or insight if anyone would like to share one last thought. Okay, well, I will wrap us up then. Just first of all, thanking you for your engagement today. Thank you for being with us today. Really appreciate your work in working through the resource guide, having the small group conversation. Just really appreciate all of that. I want to thank the Tennessee Department of Education for their support in making this opportunity available. I want to thank our philanthropic partner, Tennessee SCORE, and I certainly want to thank Jeremy Jones and his team at the Learning Accelerator for providing this extraordinary content. But most of all, I really want to stop here at the end and just thank you, our school leaders, for the incredible work that you're doing. You are, I'm just incredibly appreciative and proud of the work that you're doing to support your students, to support your families, to support your staff, your teachers, and your community. And just, I am so, just incredibly proud of the commitment that you have demonstrated to your children. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you for what you do every day for your kids. And thank you for working through these difficult circumstances to make the most for our students. We have 6 more modules for the Principal Professional Learning Series. I hope that you will join us. We'll continue to build on the learning that you engaged in today. Though this is not the end of the conversation, this is really a beginning. We want to continue to learn together, to grow together. We want to continue to grapple with these issues around student learning and success together. And I look forward to seeing you at the rest of the 6 modules that remain with us. Y'all take care, have a great day, and thanks for being with us today.